CNN has learned that the special grand jury in Fulton County, Georgia, has completed its investigation now into Trump's efforts and all of those around Trump to overturn the 2020 election results in that state. We do not yet know the results of this special grand jury's findings, but we do know that there is now a hearing on the books. The judge has scheduled it for later this month to decide whether the grand jury's report should be made public. The final decision on whether to bring any charges against Trump, or anyone for that matter, will be made by the Fulton County District Attorney, you see right there, Fani Willis. Sarah Murray has been tracking this. She's been tracking this investigation from the very beginning. She joins us now. Sarah, what are you hearing about this? What is this judge saying?
Well, look, we knew they were working on this final report, and now the judge is saying their work is completed, that the special grand jury has been resolved. They were seated in May of 2022. They had the power to subpoena witnesses. They had the power to gather evidence. They have been doing this, and they have now completed this final report that, again, prosecutors will get to see, but it's an open question whether the public will get to see it. That's something we're going to be talking about later on this month in that hearing. But look, this is an investigation that started with the now infamous phone call that former President Donald Trump made to Georgia Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger, asking Raffensperger to help him find the votes. Take a listen to a portion of that call.
All I want to do is this. I just want to find 11,780 votes, which is one more than we have.
Now, District Attorney Fani Willis has said after that call, she felt she had to open this investigation. It is expanded, though, well beyond the call to include the fake elector scheme, to include making presentations that were riddled with conspiracy theories about the election before state lawmakers, to include efforts by unauthorized people to access voting machines in at least one county. So there is a lot that this grand jury has been poring over. You know, everyone's very eager to see what's in their final report and also to see if they recommended any indictments. If so, the district attorney can then pursue those charges, Kate.
Absolutely. Sarah, if you would, stick with us. Got a lot to discuss, and you've got some great perspective on this long investigation. Also joining us right now is Michael Moore. He's a former U.S. attorney for the Middle District of Georgia. It's good to see you, Michael.
Good to see you.
What do you think could be in this grand jury's final report? Of course, it has not been made public, but could charging recommendations be included?
Yeah, well, I'm glad to be with you both. I think it's likely that there are charging recommendations in the report. Remember that the report's really an instrument, not just to the grand jury, but that the DA and the prosecutors have had their hands all over it. The grand jury is not sitting in there with notepads, you know, listed out everything they want to have, and somebody's typing this up at night. This is something that's done in conjunction with the prosecutor's office, getting down basically the wishes of the grand jury and any specific questions or comments they may have about the evidence that was presented to them. So the prosecutor knows what's in the report, no question about it. But at the same time, I also want to kind of put the cautionary instruction out there, and that is that, you know, this is just the beginning of the process. The evidence presented to this grand jury, the witness testimony presented to this special purpose grand jury has not been challenged, has not been tested by cross-examination or other defense counsel efforts. And so this is the beginning of what we would see in a normal case. That is that the prosecutor now has to make a decision about whether or not she's going to seek actually a criminal indictment from a regular grand jury in Fulton County. Again, I don't think that we're going to see a special report with no recommendations in it. The question will be, who have they recommended that she charge and on what charges?
That's actually right. And Michael, also, so there, as Sarah was laying out, there's a court date set for kind of the parties involved to argue over whether the report should be made public. Do you, Michael, think it ultimately will? What do those arguments look like?
Well, I think it's a dangerous precedent for the judge to make it public in this case. In Georgia, we have an open records statute, and one of the reasons that we don't see investigative materials and investigative reports in any pending criminal case is because the statute says, the law says, that's a reason not to disclose information until the case is concluded. So this would really change precedent and sort of, I guess, be an argument that you would see media organizations and defense counsel making from now on, saying, look, if it's the normal thing now to release investigative materials before we even get to a grand jury, then we're going to ask for that in every case. So there's a strong argument to be made that this ought to remain in the breast of the prosecutor, that she could consider it, and that she can then make her decision about moving forward the regular grand jury. It's a double-edged sword for her. On the one hand, if it comes out public, it will justify her effort and expense thus far. At the same time, it also puts an inordinate amount of pressure on her to follow the specific recommendations of the special purpose grand jury that she has to be convened in the case. So my guess is that while she may make some statements about making the report public, secretly she's probably hoping that it remains private and she can make her decision about what she does decide to present to the regular criminal grand jury.
Well, that's very interesting. And Sarah, can you remind people also the very long list of the big names who were called, and some of them forced after legal battles to try to avoid it, to appear before this special grand jury?
Yeah, I mean, we have seen a lot of big names go into this grand jury. Obviously, we don't know everyone who has gone in there, and they've heard from many, many witnesses. But, you know, we know that Rudy Giuliani was one of the people who showed up before the grand jury. We know that Boris Epstein, who is another attorney to former President Donald Trump, was there. South Carolina Senator Lindsey Graham fought this tooth and nail. He appeared before the grand jury. Brad Raffensperger was there. Brian Kemp was there. Mark Meadows was ordered to appear after he had been fighting a subpoena for his appearance as well. So, look, they got information from a number of these people. And one of the things we heard from witnesses is that the grand jury was very involved in sort of asking these witnesses follow-up questions. They had very clearly been read in on the materials. So, you know, as Mike was saying, they work with the district attorney to pull together this final report. But witnesses have described a very active grand jury throughout this process.
Absolutely. And Michael, of course, as you mentioned, the big question will be, you know, how and when anyone learns if this years-long investigation leads to an indictment. Just on that question of timing, when do you think we would know?
Well, I think the district attorney's probably been working on the indictments as we speak since they've known what's in the report. So it's pretty simple to call together a grand jury. She can do this in a regular criminal term. And make a fairly concise presentation to a grand jury. To make a case before a regular criminal grand jury, she doesn't have to lay out every witness and every piece of evidence. She could do that in a summary presentation. So she can bring in a couple of witnesses and some recorded statements if she wants to, some documents if she has them, and basically lay out the findings that were made by this special purpose grand jury and any other investigative finding that she's made. So she could really get an indictment within a couple of days, I think. And my guess is you'll see her team will take a month or two to develop their case a little further once the decision is made about the report. And then if indictments are going to come out, I think you'll see them certainly by spring.
And it was also, Sarah, just to wrap it up, it was said by a lot of smart legal minds kind of throughout over the last year that this really was the investigation that the people around Donald Trump were most nervous about, most concerned about, and a lot of legal analysts saying that they should be most concerned about in terms of Donald Trump's exposure, if he, you know, any kind of legal exposure that he does have. I'm curious as to how people are feeling now as this wraps up and things are going to move into this next phase.
Well, look, I think that has shifted somewhat because a lot of that concern was before we knew the Justice Department had such a robust investigation going on into efforts to overturn the 2020 election, efforts around January 6th. We now know a lot more about the scope of that DOJ investigation. And also, that was before the Mar-a-Lago investigation became a problem that Donald Trump was at the center of, you know, sort of hoarding these sensitive documents at Mar-a-Lago. I do think one thing is very clear, though. Donald Trump has always been at the center of the district attorney's case in Georgia. You know, the federal case may reach to Donald Trump and Merrick Garland may have a decision to make, but I think it was always very clear, at least in Georgia, this was an investigation into the former president.
Yeah, great reporting as always, Sarah. Thank you. Michael, thanks for jumping on. I really appreciate it.